And I'm
Hey, Mel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. You hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
All right.
Okay, we are live on YouTube, not on the city's page yet, but I'll get there momentarily.
Hello, everyone. Jim Winarski here. Thanks, Frank, for unmuting me and getting me in the house. I don't know how many people we got.
I'm upstairs if anyone wants to come up and visit.
I might try driving down while I'm on. Anybody else on?
I
Paul?
think pretty much everybody's on, right? Except Ed
I'm here.
Brzezinski. Yeah.
If we got everybody else on, we can get started if that works for you guys. I apologize for the technical difficulties. That's what my life's about, but that's okay. The time we have this figured out, we won't have to do this anymore, I'm hoping. But with that, we can begin. I know we had some ideas put in front of us at our finance meeting. I guess any comments, and actually, if you want to start, Mayor, with your proposal, I know you're trying to get this on this agenda. I don't know if we, personally speaking, I don't know if we need to rush it that quick. I'd rather do more homework or as much homework as possible. But with that, if you'd like to get started, Mayor, I'm good with that, if you would.
That's fine, Jim. Thanks very much. And you all should have about a page and a half that Paul and I put together. And what we tried to do is explain as clearly as possible what we're proposing we do with the funds from the Water Authority. And I'm just going to kind of walk through that. Feel free to ask any questions along the way if something doesn't make sense, or if you want to ask about an alternative approach or something like that. And we're happy to discuss this in as much detail as we need to. So under number one, we disclose in A that we're going to get approximately 96.7 million from the Erie Water Authority. And that, of course, will be a lease payment to the city of Erie. The amount equals the cash that the Erie Water Works receives from issuing the new bonds. And those new bonds are equal, the amount, the cost of that is equal to the amount they would pay on their water already billed to us each year. So that actually prepays the lease through 2060. We're also extending the lease from 2050 to 2060. Because of that extension, B under there, we're going to receive an additional I'm sorry, I have the wrong number on mine. 2.5 million, right, Paul? You know, I didn't apologize. I thought I printed out the most recent version, but I must not have. So I'll need some help from Paul with the numbers, but the additional 2.5 million, which are the points that the Water Authority will pay the city for the lease extension. So that makes the total amount that the city will receive from the Water Authority at $99.2 million. That's the total amount we're going to get from them. So here's how we're proposing in number 2, what we do with that $99.2 million. First, we'll immediately deposit $3.5 million into the general fund savings account. And that's because of COVID-19, we have a projected budget deficit this year of about $3.5 million. So that amount goes right into the general fund and it will get us through this year fine. We also want to immediately transfer $2 million to the City of Erie's Business Development Fund. And that's one of the loan funds that we use for businesses that Chris Groner runs. He's kind of out of money right now. Yes, Liz? You're muted, Liz.
Yeah, I know. Did you read B, the immediately 2.5 million? I don't
sorry.
think you did, but maybe you did. I
I think you're right.
Okay.
I apologize. I must have skipped that.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's 2.1 million, right? Paul, you're muted, Paul. You're muted,
Yeah.
Paul.
B is 2.5 million.
2.5 million. Okay. So, and those are points that the Waterworks pays us. You know, I might have read it wrong too. I apologize.
No, that's correct.
So yes, so and that's what totals the 99.4 million. Those two, A and B, total C. So that 99.4 million, we plan to use it again. First, the $3.5 million to balance the general fund for 2020. As you know, we're down in revenue. We're projecting to be down a little over $4 million, but we've actually also cut expenses with COVID-19 by a little over $1 million. So that we just want to have that 3.5 million to get us through this year. Then the second thing we want to do is put $2 million into one of the city's loan funds for Chris Groner. He plans to use that, as is detailed in Roman numerals 1 and 2 there. The 1.5 million would go to local businesses in his loan fund. So it actually adds to his loan fund. He also feels he needs some money to give his grants to get businesses going in Erie. So we're setting that money aside for his use going forward. Then, then we're going to take, let's see, Paul, what do you have as C? Because again, unfortunately, I brought home an old.
That's the 11.5 million into the general fund.
Okay.
To be used for the next 2 to 2.5 years to balance the budget, so there'll be no tax increases.
Right, and that should last at least 2.5 years. And really, by 2023, we really hope to increase non-tax income to the city through, hopefully having more people living here, more people working here, and that sort of thing. That gives us a couple of years to try to build more revenues into the city's coffers. Okay, Paul, why don't you, since I got an old version, I'm going to let you go on.
Okay.
I'll just add.
And Liz, do you want back to letter B, which you asked about, as part of the budget this year? Remembering we budgeted for a tax lien sale of our old delinquent tax bills that people haven't paid. And we're proposing using that $2.5 million in points that the Water Authority is paying us as a substitute to doing a tax lien sale. Because when you do those tax lien sales, any of the 2 or 3 companies around the country that do these sales on behalf of municipalities or counties or whatever the jurisdiction may be, they charge you 10% right off the top on your, on the money you're going to collect. Now, we as a group, we talked about this at budget time, and we, in order to stave off a larger tax increase on the citizens of Erie, we put this tax lien sale into the budget, but we're proposing not to do the tax lien sale this year to save the taxpayers of the city of Erie that 10% fee that we would have to pay, and using the points that the Water Authority is going to give us as a substitute to that. So that, Liz, that was what letter B was all about. Then letter E, we're going to transfer the remaining balance of approximately $79.7 million into an investment account. And this type of investment account, we're looking at putting it into a balanced portfolio account, sort of just like the water reserve fund and also our pension fund, which would consist of about 60% stocks and 40% fixed income investments, such as bonds or preferred stocks. And as noted here, this is the same investment policy used for both the Water Reserve Fund and the City of Erie pension funds. Letter F, through ordinance, the above 5 amounts will be appropriated through E. The mayor made a good note here in letter G. Or do you want to take that up, Mayor, as an investment advisor in your own right? Or do you want me to read that?
You can go ahead and read it. When you get a chance, Paul, could you email me the right version?
Yes, I'll do it right this second.
Okay. And while he's doing that, I'll let's see. We're at the, I have a different version again, so I just want to make sure. We're at since the inception in 1881?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay. So we, since the inception of keeping track of portfolios like this, which was in 1881, the average annual return on a balanced portfolio, again, that's 60% stocks, 40% bonds, is 7.8%. There are years where it's down. There's years where it's up much more than that, but that's the average. For the last 10 years, the average return has been 6%. So for conservative planning purposes, we assumed an average rate of return on this portfolio of about 5%. So all our numbers are based on that. So we're expecting 5% of the beginning balance as well as any reinvested earnings, which there should be some of that takes place as well. Any questions on that at all? Okay.
Liz?
Okay, we had talked about who might be the management firm for this, and have you determined that? And if so, how much is, what about management fees that there would be every year for this? Do you know that yet? Or are we still at the framework stage?
Paul, I'll let
Mayor?
you handle that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Liz, this morning, the city controller, Teresa Stankiewicz, and myself spoke with Seth Lynn from DeHaab Associates, who are that's the firm that handles both the pension fund and the Water Reserve Fund as an investment advisor. And Seth, as part of what he does for us, is in the process. I mean, I don't know if at 5:30 tonight he's doing it, but as of this morning, he's going to put together a plan for us to try to help us through this process. So, as the mayor said, we're proposing putting it into the Water Reserve, But, at this point in time, we think that's the best option.
Yeah, but Liz's question is, what's the fee that we will be charged?
The money managers in the pension fund and the water reserve fund they absolutely do charge annual fees. At this point in time, if we piggyback this money into the water reserve fund, it would be the same fees that we're paying there.
Do we know what those are?
Off the top of my head, I can't tell you, because
All right.
each of the money managers, remembering there's a fixed asset and there's maybe Teresa, could you answer that? I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay, if we can't answer it right now, let's find
Yeah.
out the answer and get it out to
Don't
them
know.
tomorrow.
I know it's based on basis points depending on the value of each of the
Value.
accounts. And I can get those exact numbers or percentages together to get them to you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Teresa.
Teresa.
Sure.
Mayor, I've had
Appreciate it if
a
you'd send that to everybody on the call here.
Mayor question.
Yes.
So we're creating this investment fund. So what happens, how do you use the funds as it hopefully makes money over the years? Is it
Yes.
something that, every year you kind of just look and see where it's at, and then you determine if you take some of that money to put it elsewhere? Is that, there'll be a mechanism for that?
Actually, if we could just keep moving through this, as explained in a couple of places coming up here. So I
Got
think
it.
that moves us to letter H, right? We expect to withdraw approximately $6.3 million from the balanced portfolio annually. So every year we'll withdraw $6.3 million to pay down the city's debt each year. This, based on this and the assumed rate of return, the portfolio should last at least until 2040. And in 2040, also city debt will be paid off if there's no more debt taken on. So we don't know, obviously, what's going to happen over the next 20 years here. But my goal would be not take on any more debt and have it all paid off by 2040, which again makes life much easier for the city. I know it's not going to be easy, but that's kind of the goal here. And we based that 6.3 million on an expected annual rate of return of the 5% that I mentioned earlier, because we felt pretty comfortable we'd be able to average at least that over this 20-year period of time. So we'll use any balance available in the fund to call any bonds when due and pay them off early. But we're only going to pay them off early if it's advantageous based on current interest rates on the bonds and the expected return on the balanced portfolio. The expected return could vary year to year. We know the rates on the bonds though, and chances are if it's below 5%, unless we're expecting a real bad recession or something like that, but if the rate on the bonds is below 5% and we're earning at least 5% on the portfolio, chances are we'll just make the minimum payment rather than pay them off. As you can see also in letter I there, currently our callable bonds are coming due in next year, 2022, 2025, 2027, and 2029. So that's when we're able to actually pay bonds off. So, and now Jay also kind of relates to how we use the money. If this balanced portfolio returns more than 5%, surplus funds may be used. We want to do it conservatively, but for other projects to help Erie grow. But funds would only be used this way, obviously, with city council approval. And I can tell you, because word has kind of got out about what we're doing with this, I got a lot of people calling me, asking me for money right now. And all I'm telling them is that this money is primarily to solve the city's debt problem, which, as you know, is one of our three major financial problems. So I can't commit to the money going anywhere else until we see how it grows over time. And chances are it's going to be at least a couple years. If we can build up some balances over the first few years, if we have good years, then we might start looking at what other projects we could fund that would continue to help Erie grow. So did that answer your question, Dave, or is there anything else related?
Yeah, I didn't flip my page over, sorry.
No problem. No
Hey,
problem. at all.
David,
Yes.
do you still, I'm sorry, David, do you still have that document that we looked at last Wednesday at the finance committee meeting? Page
in my
10
email.
of the, pardon me?
It's in my email, yeah.
Yeah, page 10 of that document kind of shows the ebb and flow of the beginning balance, earning some interest and taking that money out so that we're down to the zero balance in 20 years.
I have two questions. One is in regard to the mayor saying people are, asking for money. My concern would be, how would this impact contract negotiations? I mean, is there going to be a sense that, hey, the city has this extra money now, so cough up, higher. I know that the police negotiations are almost done. We already have a firefighter contract, but is there consideration to how this might impact the union negotiations?
I guess probably they could do that, but they're really twisting the facts if they do, because this money is basically to solve our debt problem, which is one of the three major financial problems PFM identified that we have. And it's only if the investments earn a lot more than what we expect that we'll be able to do anything else.
Okay. And then my other question would be then, so we're losing, I think Jim Winarski would ask about this every time we talked about this. So we're losing, well, we won't be getting the annual lease payment, but we will more than make up for that because we're going to be using this money to reduce our debt every year. Is that correct? I mean, is that a way too simple way to look at
No.
it? Because like
Yes.
you're taking it from, we aren't getting it here, but then we have money that normally would have come, I guess, from the general fund, and we're going to use this instead. Am I right about that? But
You're-
actually more than the lease payment that we have been getting,
Yes.
correct?
You are
Liz-
absolutely,
Oh,
you're
so I'm
absolutely, sorry, Paul. You're absolutely right, Liz. If you look at number 4, the last item on this sheet, again, it's reminding you we've made conservative projections, but with the projections we've made, it will reduce the city's expenses by $2 million per year, and that's net for the next 19 years. We'll
Okay.
save at least $2 million net of what we're giving up in revenue, but what we're paying down in debt and reducing in interest payments. It's $2 million per year positive for the city's budget.
Okay.
And
Yeah, and I
obviously-
had that in front of me. I just wanted to make sure I understood it. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. And it
Liz,
really is
oh.
go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just gonna say, when you call or you sent me that email at 3:30, I answered, if you open your emails up, I answered that question for you. Hopefully the math worked out.
Yeah, I do. I have it. I just thought it would be good to have all of council hear that at the same time.
Gotcha.
I did get your
Okay.
email. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to complete number 4, if the balanced fund performs better than 5% per year on average, which we think there's a good chance it will, but we're not absolutely counting on that. But if it does, then the surplus funds we do want to use to help transform Erie, make it better. Basically, get more people living and working in Erie and have Erie start to grow, have great neighborhoods, eliminate blight, all that sort of thing. And we'll need council's help and approval in terms of what's the best use of those surplus funds that we may generate, and we certainly hope to generate. I think 3 is the only one we didn't really talk about, so I'll just hit on that very briefly. But that 6.3 million in principal and interest listed above will be appropriated into the city's budget each year. So budgets you see going forward, assuming you approve this, budgets you see going forward will include 6.3 million coming in from this fund that we create. And that will obviously more than replace the Erie Water Works lease payment, and it's going to be used mainly to pay down debt. The annual transfers of this amount, it's important to pay down the debt and limit the need for tax increases. Again, that's really what we're trying to do here. I think this could really be transformative for Erie, at least from a financial perspective in terms of where we stand financially and what we can accomplish. So hopefully that was a clear kind of explanation of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it. I certainly welcome any questions, suggestions. If you see another alternative, if you want to suggest that, welcome any input at this point.
One thing I always worry about is digging the hole again. And we was mentioned earlier about taking out more bonds and kind of getting back in the same situation. You know, I know there's no way to predict that right now, besides being successful in trying to bring in more tax dollars, and that's the goal here. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there as and we can't really do anything this council and this administration, but this certainly should be the goal, is to not to redig the hole that we're trying to fill back in here.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you. And it takes us working together to accomplish that, really.
Another quick question is, you know, this is kind of a framework for how to spend this, but what happens in future administrations if there's a change?
We, at the point, I'm not going to be mayor again. I am planning to run next year, as I think you all know. And, but if I don't get elected, let's say next year, somebody else gets elected, what I will probably try to do at the end of next year is work with council again to put something in place to, right now, what we've put in place could be adjusted by people. But there are other ways we could do it that would make it permanent. And if I don't get reelected, and at some point, you know, I can only serve at most 3 terms, which is 12 years, and this is a 20-year project, and I'm already in the 3rd, so I really only, at the most, serve about 9 more years. That's something, depending on the situation at the time, if I'm still in office 9 years from now, I might be working with council to put something permanent in place with this, for this to move forward, so that somebody else can't come in and start to create the same problem that we're solving right now.
I have a question too.
Yes, Ed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ed.
Yeah. You know, this isn't our money. This money that we're getting is for the next couple generations. And I see what you're trying to do, but anyway, I look at it, I'm seeing 15 million skimmed off the top of future generations' money. I would like to see, very frankly, the entire amount put into a very guarded account, with a caveat that the only thing that could be taken out would be for debt, not for telephone lights or anything, you know, telephone poles, street lights, or you name what. Everybody's got a favorite little thing. But I would rather go into COVID with my eyes open and know what's happening with this year's budget instead of throwing money at it and pretending that everything is good. I am of the persuasion right now of making a resolution to that effect next week. I'm just letting you know how I feel about that.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I agree that we need to have something written in stone to say that this money that was allocated to us is the people's money to pay down the debt of the city of Erie, so that 20 years from now, there's money there, and that council will know that they can only use that money to pay down debt and benefit the taxpayers as far as maybe no increase in taxes. Chris Groner has done wonderful things. However, is there a way that he can work with an Erie bank, as far as a small town bank, to do what he's doing with a bank instead of that money? Is there any possibility at all that he can do what he can do with a bank in Erie?
From 40 years in banking, I can tell you, I don't believe any bank, any financial institution would do what we're doing.
Could we put it out there for banks, just like, you know, job position, a wanted, a bank willing to do low interest rates for small Erie businesses? Have we ever tried that before?
I guess my experience, go ahead, Renee.
I was just gonna say, the purpose of the revolving loan fund is to fill those gaps because we can't get the banks to provide that funding to minority business, startup businesses, because they don't have a proven track record and the banks don't want to take that risk. And so Chris and his loan board evaluate the pros and cons, what the risks are, and they know that they're taking a certain amount of risk, but that it's important for building our economy for the future. So that's why he needs that funding to close the gaps so that these deals can happen.
The deals can happen, excuse me, may I speak?
Sure. Ed.
Yes.
I just have a lot of, I'm not the guy that rains on a parade, believe me, but there's a lot of things that worry me. I have quite a few acquaintances, I shall say, that are telling me that they are very happy, and Erie Insurance is very happy being remote. There's a lot of people who would be buying lunches, etc., and making our downtown come alive. We better get some commitments from these folks. Are we can open City Hall for one thing? There's some more people that eat and shop and things like that. Is Erie Insurance going to sit there and let everybody be remote with a lot of big buildings there that might be empty? Going that way, what are we going to do with 120 some residential apartments that we're talking about building when nobody's going to be downtown to be there because they're remote? Again, it sounds like I'm raining on a parade, but these are answers that I have asked questions for. When we passed this thing and I abstained, it was because nobody could wait 2 weeks to get some answers. Now we're doing the same thing again. And when we said it was okay to take that money, it was for debt. And like I told you, I see 15 million coming off the top. That's not debt. That's all I get.
I wonder if we, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I was gonna say, in a perfect world, that's the way things go. Personally, with the money is, yes, we need to pay down our debt, and yes, we have to have a debt schedule, but also we have to, operate the city. We don't know what the operational budgets are gonna look like right now, and we have to invest in our city. So those are things that I would be looking at, not to say that these things here are good or bad with the 15 million that are proposed to be taken out, but I do think that the city should take some time to examine what's the best way that some of this money could be used, because of the three-headed dragon, the one that we're not addressing with this 15 million is increasing our tax base. And so I think there needs to be something in there that increases our tax base if we're going to be spending the good residents' money. And
I have one question. This is for Chris.
You're muted, Michael.
Yeah, and so I have a question for Chris. So some of these bonds that we owe, and of the $186 million of debt we have, the question is, can that debt be refinanced and we might get more favorable terms with the lower bond rates?
Who are you asking that to, Michael? Okay.
I think he said Chris.
Chris, who? I
I
don't
think
think
he
it's any
meant
Chris.
Paul. I think he meant Paul.
Yeah, Paul, excuse me. Paul Litchtenwatch.
You're on mute, Paul.
Unmute. Got it. Okay. Michael, as the mayor said, we are looking at all options every time bonds come due for being refundable or paid to see what the most advantageous method of paying these debt instruments down is. As the mayor said, we have some bonds that are due next year that are callable. Depending on where the market is at that point in time, it may be better to call those bonds, or maybe better to pay 2% and make 5% on our money. So yes, all options are being looked at. Anytime there's been a savings in the past, we have refunded bonds and taken the savings and used that savings into the general fund. So to answer your question, those options are always being looked at. Every time a new year hits, every time a new bond becomes callable or refundable.
And I understand, Ed, your concerns about what somebody might do with this money, which is not what we intend. So I'm wondering if we could put something on, I don't know if it would be what it would be, an ordinance or something that would say at least $6.3 million per year from these funds has to be used to pay down debt. And maybe we could also put something in that would say city council has to approve any other use, any use of these funds for any other purpose other than paying down debt. We probably
My
need.
thought was having designated money for debt would not allow any union people coming up saying, you've got 15 million sitting in the general fund. We want some. You can't blame them. That's negotiations,
Yes.
right? But if we have money that's earmarked, yeah, we have money there, but that money belongs to our children, our grandchildren, and so forth. At 2060, I'll be pushing up grass. But I don't want them looking back and saying, boy, that dummy didn't do anything to help us, did he? 2060, yeah. I guess,
Yeah,
I don't even like myself being this negative, but somebody has to
that's
be.
okay. So
Yeah, so, legally, how do you restrict that? That's kind of the question that I think Ed is.
Yes, exactly. So what we'll do is we'll talk to
Be a
Ed Betts about this,
restricted fund.
about that tomorrow and see.
I'm on the call.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't get on. I couldn't get on Zoom, so I had to call in, and Frank was able to get me through on the phone.
Great.
You've got the short answer is you've got to spend the money, and it has to be. I mean, if what we want to prevent is a future mayor or a future council from changing kind of the course of this and saying, hey, we've got money, we want to spend it in a different manner, you need to spend that money now. And so you would need to commit. Doing an ordinance is probably not going to cut it, and we can talk about some specific ways to address it, but an ordinance can be undone by another ordinance.
Anytime.
And so what you really need to do is place that money. I'll use kind of a personal kind of type reference, and that is if I have a lot of money and I want to take care of somebody in the future, I don't want it to be spent on wasteful things, I can set up a trust. And so it's probably going to be something along those types of lines, that it will be a debt repayment trust of some sort. And the words I'm using may not be right, but I think we can all kind of grasp our heads around it. That money will then be spent. It is no longer our money. It is then held in a separate account, not controlled by city council or by the mayor, and is then spent on debt and only debt.
Okay.
Thank you, Ed, for that. That is very thoughtful. Like, we really need to think about that. You just brought up a really good point, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm not sure exactly how that'll ultimately play out, but I think we've had several discussions because you can't simply pay all the debt off in one lump sum. You just can't, because it's not all due now, and Paul will be able to give you a half-hour explanation of why that is. I don't fully understand all that, and I don't pretend to. But the bottom line is you need to commit that money in some way, shape, or form so that it's not free to be spent in any way other than payment of the debt. Whatever portion you assign for the debt needs to be spent now.
Ed, do you know if any other municipalities have faced this and created such a trust?
No, I do not.
I mean, I think it would be helpful to know that we aren't like, just
The
pioneering.
guinea pig.
this.
Well, I mean, this is a unique situation. I mean, I do talk with other solicitors from other areas, but this isn't selling an asset. This is getting a prepayment on a lease. This is a very unique type of situation. And so I don't agree with the use of the word guinea pig necessarily, but I think we are kind of going in somewhat of an uncharted territory. And that's actually a luxury that you have by getting this money. And now you have an ability to do something with it. I mean, I'm certainly open to trying to do some research if other places have had prepayment of lease payments and then applied that toward long-term debt. But the concept isn't all that unique. We just have to restrict that money so that it can't be spent freely, because that would be a disaster. I'm not here to say what's right or what's wrong, but if you pick a path and you make a very significant decision, you don't want going a different direction 2 years from now and then a different direction 2 years later, because what will happen is all the money will be gone and the debt will still be there.
Chicago.
I think that one thing, though, that we do have to keep in mind, I think possibly then that would maybe change the administration's plans if there were extra money to be able to use it for some other reason. So we'll have to think that through, it seems to me, right?
Well, and that is part of it. I mean, and that would all be dictated by the terms of the restrictive documents that we ultimately enter into. If we could restrict just the principal and not the interest, and that's really kind of, I think, with the most current plan, the way that we're going about it. I guess at the end of the day, I need everybody to tell me what we're doing with all of the money, and then my job will be to make it so that that is accomplished.
And when are we deciding what we're doing with all of the money? What's our timeline here?
I don't know that we have a timeline we have to do it in, but obviously I'd like to do it as quickly as possible, but I think we need to take time, make sure we do it right. I like the idea of restricting, I guess I wouldn't say principal, but the amount we put into principal to start, and saying that amount can only be used to pay down debt. That way, if we have a loss 1 year, some of the interest would go into, what we can't use, because we'd have a total amount we can't use, probably around, $80 million or whatever. But I like that idea. And I think we should be very careful about spending money for anything else, especially in the early years of this, until we're comfortable that we've built up a surplus that's not going to vanish if the market tanks for 6 or 9 months or something like that. So I think this is a great conversation. It's great things we can add to this to make sure it's used the way we intend it to be used. So Ed,
We don't vote on this on October 21st. We're going to wait for Ed to come back with a structure of some type of trust. Am I right about that?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. I think, we want to know what we're doing before before you guys vote.
Okay.
Mayor, not to switch a subject, but the business development fund, if we're putting money and transfer money into that, all that'll be spent in Erie for Erie businesses in the city, correct?
Correct. Yes.
It only makes sense. I just had to ask the question.
It has to be used in the city. It's the only place it can be used.
And with Chris kind of representing the city and the county, is the county putting startup funds, and are those going to be used in the city, of course, in the county?
I think he does use county funds in the city as well, because the city is part of the county.
Cool.
So I think we can get up to a third of the county funds, because our population is about a third of the county.
Okay.
But they can't get any of our funds.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm just saying it out loud because it's pretty obvious it has to stay in the
That's
city.
good. That's good. Thanks.
Mayor?
Mike?
I think it's a great idea of restricting the funds, but I would do like look at the bond repayment scheduling or the recalling schedule or refunding schedule, and put an initial lump sum into that category. That would so that we can see like in the matrix of whether what's going up, what's going down. This is over here and this is going to pay this debt for so many years. And because in theory, you know, the money has to last at least 10 years. We're under a 10-year LRTA, so our tax base is not going to expand. And so whatever happens, you know, we're not going to be able to generate any other revenue from, well, actually from that type of taxes, from our land taxes, our real estate tax. So we have to keep that in mind, that that is going to be flat for the next 10 years as we look at what we do with the money, what we have to do with the money, how our budgets are going to look over the next 10 years, considering that we're not going to be expanding our tax base.
Right, not the real estate tax base won't expand, but I'm hoping that also brings in more people working and living in Erie, which will help our income tax income. What other questions?
Paul,
Go ahead.
yeah, I was just, sorry to interrupt. If the monies were to go into the water reserve, it would take a supermajority of council to release any of them monies, and I'm just going to throw out there, I don't know what we're going to do for paving over the next 3-4 years, what we're going to, are we working on what's a plan to help cover, say, our $3 to $4 million in paving every year, now that we won't be getting the yearly lease payment from the water authority? Is the interest going to be able to cover that, as well as pay down the debt?
No, that the $6.3 million we're going to be taking out of that fund in interest and principal will be going into the large pot, which you'd consider to be the general fund. And that amount is basically a little more than $2 million more than would normally go into that fund. So we're working on the paving issue, you know, as part of this year's bond or budget and part of the 5-year long-term budget plan also.
Okay, as I still worried, like our thought is not to take out another bond or not need any more monies, to borrow any more monies, although it's hard to see in the future. I guess I would just want to make sure we're doing something right to help keep us from possibly doing that.
Yes, that's a good point. And we are planning, as you know, to present the next 5-year budget to you on October 21st here at your meeting. And obviously it's going to show you 5 years out. I think we're probably going to assume, it won't be approved yet, but we're probably going to assume in that budget that that 6.3 million is coming in from the trust that's set up or whatever it is this money will be housed in. And you'll be able to see, you know, what the impact is at least 5 years out.
Mr. Mayor, have
Great.
you had any, excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any discussions with Erie Insurance as to what their once the pandemic is straightened out a little bit, what their plans are? Are they going to bring people in? Because a lot of folks working for Erie Insurance, they think they're going to be home. Working remote's been working well for them, from what everybody tells me. That's a real concern I have. A lot
From
of people
outside
not
the city.
Yeah. Oh, anybody
yeah.
that's doing remote. They're not in the buildings downtown. What we're trying to build up
Yeah.
is a huge
just-
keg in. Really, I mean, not a keg. Could use a keg right now, but seriously, that and we don't know about Hammond either. Hammond, I think, is still going full blast with us, but these are our shareholders, and they play a very, very important part in beautiful plans. I'm not trying to wreck the plans here, State Street. You know, they're wonderful, wonderful ideas.
Yeah.
But ideas, look at the condos on 14th Street, 14th and what is that, Peach over there? That was a great idea too.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that was such a great idea, but
it's
I
proven not
think-
to be.
yeah, I guess I don't know the answer to your question, but I know people are people. We like being around other people. I think it's very difficult, even though I've been trying to abide by the social distancing at all times. It's really doesn't feel right to me, and I know we're going to probably be doing it for several more months yet. But I'm hoping eventually, you know, there's a vaccine for COVID-19, and that we'll be able to start getting together and having events like Celebrate Erie in downtown Erie, where there's hundreds of thousands of people that are, you know,
Getting our life
maybe-
back. Yeah.
yeah. I think people will go back to that once we're able to start doing it again. And Erie Insurance and Hammett and St. Vincent's have all put hundreds of thousands of dollars into their new buildings. So I think they're
Yeah.
going to want those people back working in them. I haven't had a conversation though with anybody about that in answer to your question.
Okay. Just like I said, I'm just concerned.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm hoping it goes the way you said it.
yes. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate it. Is there any other questions or comments, Paul?
Yeah, I have one of council. As we're talking about two separate pools of money in effect, the 96.7 million we're getting from the prepayment of the lease and the $2.5 million of points that we're receiving from the waterworks as part of this deal. As we're proposing the 2.5 million to be used in lieu of doing a tax lien sale this year, I wanted to put that on agenda next week as an appropriation ordinance to get that money into the general fund revenues so that we don't have to do the tax lien sale. Because I guess if we're gonna vote that down, then I'm gonna have to get going on the tax lien sale so that we can get that extra $2.5-3 million by the end of the year. So I am going to put the $2.5 million appropriation ordinance on next Wednesday, unless you as a group tell me that's a bad thing and you're not for that.
Paul, in the long run, isn't it better not to do the tax lien sale? if we
Yeah,
don't
as
have
I
to?
said, Renee, as I said earlier, you lose 10% right off the top in interest and fee payments by doing the tax lien sale.
That would be about $250,000 we lose.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
And we don't lose it. We'll get that money in a year or two. So, Jim?
Yeah, I'd rather save that if we can for a future budget revenue that we may have to fall back on.
Yes.
Then if we don't have to use it this year, let's hold off and not touch that yet.
Okay, so then the other 96.7, you will not see an ordinance appropriating that next Wednesday. But again, we still have to continue with these conversations to figure out what we're going to do. Ed's going to look into, setting, I'll look into Ed's looking into, can we make this into a trust of some sort? We can set up from the accounting standpoint, a special revenue fund to handle this. And Seth from DeHob, our pension and water reserve advisor, is looking into methodology on how it would be best to invest this money and then take annual withdrawals out.
And the other thing we have to do, and I think Teresa's going to do this, is find out how much the fees would be on this money that's going into the fund.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to check, because the amount typically reduces the percentage of the fees based on the amount, so we'll probably have to talk to whoever would be handling it and see what their fees are and communicate that then at the council too. So that won't be on the agenda next Wednesday, like Paul said, just the money to prevent us so that we don't have to.
From doing a tax lien.
Yes, yes.
Sounds good.
This is Ed. I have one other thing I wanted to just say. When I kind of used the term, or no, I didn't kind of. When I use the term trust, we need to. One of the things we have to do is try to chart out. I'm going to need a lot of input from Paul. We're going to have to chart out when the money is going to be spent, because some of these, the more restrictions we place on the money, the less potentially the less investment opportunities we have. It might have to be kind of like a CD versus putting it in the stock market. And so we need to come up with a financial plan of when these things need to be paid off and how we restrict them. And so this may be I'm just forewarning you, this may be somewhat of a cumbersome process with a whole lot of different pools of money being restricted in different ways. I don't know exactly how that's going to look yet, but once we have a framework of what we're going to pay and how much we're going to be restricting, we'll place that money we'll come up with a plan to restrict the money appropriately.
And our plan there is that it would be a balanced portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. The 40% in bonds would probably be where we'd have investments that aren't going to fluctuate much in value. Not necessarily everything in there, but we could have enough in there to make sure we have money for the next couple of years set aside.
Ed, there's a Hamilton Trust in the city of Novato, California. I don't know if you could look into that, if that has anything similar to what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'll certainly look at that. And at least I promise you that we'll come up with a plan that properly restricts it without overly restricting it.
Ed, is there a chance, I know you said we could do an ordinance possibly on what the money is officially used for. Could we do a ordinance that would have a date on it that it cannot be changed up to a certain date per se? So in case a different council or a different administration came in and they wanted to use that money for something else, there would be that ordinance that cannot be touched, and we'll just say till 2030 or 2035, even 2040. Could we do an ordinance that way where we're still getting the best bang for our dollar and making sure it's going to what it was originally intended for?
The short answer is no. The problem is that whatever the current the current city council and current mayor makeup is what is best for the city of Erie. So if 3 years from now we have a different makeup and a different view, and there's an asset that's able to be spent a different way, then the law will favor the new council's vision. And so that becomes a problem. You're doing something that has long-term ramifications. You need to really do it now. If you do it in the form of an ordinance, a court is not going to prohibit a new council from enacting a different ordinance or vacating an ordinance. So you just, that won't, there are some.
You can't put the stipulation in.
You can't, not to allow me to sleep at night knowing that money's protected. No.
Okay.
I think we need to get the word out in the media by way of news, the newspaper, what have you, that people should not be asking the city of Erie for money for their organizations. Thank you.
Because at the end of the day, we're still 169 or 67 million in debt. Whether we got a little chunk here, that we're still millions in debt.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions, council? I mean, like the mayor said, this is a good first step. I know we're, and it's going to take a few more, and I know with our budget sessions, this is going to play into them very much. I definitely agree, and I hope my colleagues agree that at this time, not to do the lien sale, take that money off the top, at least to cover that end of it, and save that money for possibly 2 to 3 or 4 years down the road. Other than that, we definitely got a lot of notes and a lot of numbers in front of us, but if there isn't any other questions for Paul or the mayor, we can adjourn tonight.
One more question. We just signed off on the resolution, I guess you'd call it, to or the contract to hire a law firm to do the tax sale. Has that paperwork already been executed, or at this point has it not been?
I believe that it has, and it's been submitted.
Yeah, but can I, Ed, Michael's asking about the not a tax lien sale where we're selling delinquent taxes. He's talking about the September selling delinquent real estate 3-year out houses. Correct, Michael? Yeah.
So this is a different tax sale.
Yes.
And so what do we sell at this one? Just so.
A delinquent tax lien sale that we budgeted is a sale of the delinquent notes that are on various properties. So the properties themselves aren't being sold. What happens is if I owe Erie County Tax Claim Bureau $3,000, we're selling my $3,000 note to the county to a third party for $3,000. And so we get $3,000 for that minus fees. But then as the interest and penalties keep growing and growing and growing on my house, the firm or the company that buys the liens, they make more money on that year after year after year for people not paying their taxes. So what we approved by was it the last council meeting or 2 meetings ago? I can't remember. Was the firm that acts as the lawyer for when the county sells properties that are more than 3 years past due on their taxes. Two different type of situations.
Thank you.
I believe if there isn't any other questions, we will adjourn this study session. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks a lot, everybody. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Mayor. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody.